Today we celebrate these two apostles, Simon and Jude, together. And in some respect, what they represent to me are the underdogs among the apostles. Those who were like the forgotten ones among the chosen 12, because Simon and Jude were kind of under the shadows of the other Simon and Jude. This Simon was under the shadow of St. Peter, Simon Peter, and we know whose shadow Jude was under, the betrayer, the traitor. And so I'm sure that this followed them throughout their ministry, whenever they would introduce themselves to a new community and who hadn't known any of the apostles. They were probably always being compared to these other apostles. So in some regard, they were like under their shadow, and maybe even like the underdogs, the discounted or the disqualified. And yet they became, at least Jude, I don't know about Simon, the patron saint of impossible cases. St. Jude, of course, has a huge popularity as a miracle worker. And hopefully, all those people who have, especially from the Mexican culture, who have the big St. Jude sticker, decal in the back of their rearview mirror or the back of the window on their truck, hopefully they recognize that St. Jude's graces, greatness comes completely from Jesus Christ and not from himself. Because there is a danger of making an idol, even out of a saint, if we divorce the saint from Jesus. So St. Jude is an amazing miracle worker, but all of his greatness, of course, comes through the one mediator between God and man, Jesus our Lord. And we see that when Jesus chose his apostles, he prayed. Whenever he came, and this was an important decision, who he was going to choose to lead his church, to represent him after his ascension. And so he spent the whole night on the mountaintop praying, asking the Father's direction before making this important decision. And so the list of the 12 apostles that we have, beginning with Simon Peter, and Simon Peter is always named first. If you examine the four Gospels and the Acts of the Apostles, whenever there is any kind of list naming the apostles, or whenever there's a moment where there was one apostle that needed to speak for the rest as the spokesperson, it was always Peter. He is the prince of the apostles. He is the first among equals. And this goes to show the importance of his role as the head of the church, the vicar of Christ, representing Jesus' authority. And so the role of St. Peter is paramount to Jesus' vision for a church that he would establish on the rock of St. Peter's confession of faith, acknowledging Jesus as the Christ. So Jesus clearly had a vision for a church, a religion that would be his instrument and sacrament of a right relationship with him. And so when we listen to this list, Simon, who we named Peter, his brother Andrew, James, John, Philip, Bartholomew, Matthew, Thomas, etc., that's exactly what we hear every time the priest celebrates the Roman canon, the first Eucharistic prayer, is this list of the first 12 apostles whom Jesus chose as the foundation stones of his family of faith, the new covenant. And then after that list of the 12 apostles, we have the first popes. And so we see how the popes are successors to the apostles and St. Peter. And from these chosen ones of Jesus come all of the bishops and popes after them. There's an apostolic succession. And St. Peter, in the first reading to the Ephesians, acknowledges and reminds us that we are not to be strangers of God, foreigners to God's family, but intimate friends who belong to his heart and whose lives are built up in the Spirit on the foundation of the apostles and prophets. And so our calling is to abide in the Spirit of Jesus, that the Spirit of Jesus and our heart become one, and that we're constantly being built up in the grace and truth of Jesus Christ. How? According to our own personal, subjective, and private interpretation? No, according to the wisdom of his saints. The apostles and prophets represent the wisdom of God's closest friends, those who are most intimately united to God's Spirit in grace and truth. And these are the best teachers, the best objective standards to check whether or not we are being true disciples, whether the faith that we hold today as God's friends coalesces, is in koinonia, connection and communion with what the first believers taught. And so our faith in being built up in the Spirit of Jesus' grace and truth is established on the rock foundation of the apostles and prophets, the wisdom of the saints, going all the way back to apostolic times, to those who knew Jesus directly. And so we too are called to be built up in the Spirit, which means to become love as God is love. Because this is the ultimate school of the Spirit. This is what sanctifies us, allowing the Spirit of Jesus and his Sacred Heart to teach us the meaning and wisdom of authentic humility and true love, according to the heart of God, and to be transformed in the fire of this true love. This is to be built up in the Spirit, that our lives may have the same spirit of the apostles and the prophets. And this happens in the context of our ordinary daily lives, not in extraordinary external expressions, but in very simple, ordinary, sometimes mundane contexts. But the flare of the fire of love through faith that we put into the little things is what makes a big difference in who we are and who we become for the glory of God and to draw souls to Jesus.